What is going on, everybody? Welcome to OG55 Live. In this video, we're talking Tokyo Disneyland's Space Mountain and what could it possibly mean for the Tomorrowland in Anaheim. There is a lot of chatter, a lot of stuff going on with this whole topic. It's going to be a fun show today, everybody. Buckle up. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of OG55 Live. In this video, we're talking all about the Tokyo Disneyland Space Mountain renovation or reimagining or whatever they're calling it. And we're also going to talk about how that might tie into Disneyland's Tomorrowland. There's been a lot of chatter on that front. So it's pretty interesting times that we live in indeed. I want to, first of all, before we get started, introduce my fantastic panel. I have Mr. Freshly Squeezed, producer Dre, VashSky, back joining us today. Dre, how are you today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. This is an interesting one, and it's got everybody talking. So I cannot wait to get into this. But if you want to interact with me, you can do so at VashSky, just right down there, just like it's spelled on Twitter, for all your robust discussion. It's a pretty interesting time. Lots to talk about. You see, robust discussion alert right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now, OrangeGo55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. In commemoration of today's topic, I thought this was pretty appropriate here. Let's see if I can play it. There you go. Yeah. It's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, right? This one's going to be an interesting one, folks. But before we start, let's go ahead and introduce our buddy George here.
Yes, down below we got Mr. D23, host of Citrus Corner, Mr. George. How you doing today, George?
I'm doing good. It's glad to be back on the channel with you fellas, and I was really looking forward to this topic because I think just like myself and as Vash had mentioned, this one kind of caught everyone by storm here. And there's a lot to discuss and what could it be for the horizon for the future of tomorrow.
Yeah, no, 100%. George, if you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Disney George. And of course, I'm part of Orange Grove 55's channel with Citrus Corner.
Perfect. Let's get this party started. Before we do that, though, I want to welcome everybody into the chat. We got Mullah's 1289. Thank you for joining us. We got Bran Tanaka. Thank you for joining us. We got our buddy Theme Park Casual with Hey Kids. Thank you, Casual, for joining us. Mr. Tony Adams, Jalen Morris, and Crystal Ray today. So we have a packed house today. We're talking all about Tomorrowland. So let's go ahead and get the party started. So Tokyo Disney announced just the other day that they are going to be completely redoing their Space Mountain. They're going to be completely reimagining it, and this is the official artwork for their new Space Mountain, which looks kind of like a weird, I don't know, like this weird kind of hybrid, I guess, of like Tron and like old school Space Mountain. Very interesting. George, you haven't been on the channel for a little while. So I'm going to start with you, brother. What are your overall thoughts, first impressions of this concept art for Tokyo Disneyland's kind of reimagined Space Mountain?
Well, I think, as I said before, this one kind of caught us all by storm. But yet at the same time, especially with Tokyo Disney, they're not afraid to kind of go outside the box and like just kind of do their own thing. And that is like the quintessential of what we want Disney to be, especially for our domestic parks. And I think honestly, for as many times as we had this discussion, Tomorrowland needs a reboot. Tomorrowland needs a different kind of tomorrow. And I think that's like one of the kind of standout lands is because when you have something that is specified for the future and the future is constantly moving every single day. We constantly get new technology, new futuristic gadgets or what have you, that the land would constantly have to be re-updating itself for a short amount of time. So I think Disney would have to then kind of take a different approach on how they foresee Tomorrowland. And I kind of like how they started out with, I believe it's at Disneyland Paris, kind of like have that discovery type of feel, that steampunk Jules Verne type of feel.
Yes.
And now with Tokyo Disney, I kind of like it. It has like this very futuristic, as you mentioned, a Tron vibe, and it definitely sets the stage of what could possibly, to come as far as what Tomorrowland goes. Because, I mean, we've mentioned it on this channel. I mentioned it on my channel, on so many other media platforms, that especially with Disneyland's Tomorrowland, it definitely needs some change. And, I'm just going to say it right here on this channel. I said it before and I'll say it again. We may hear something a little bit more tied into this at the D23 Expo.
Yep, 100%, 100%. Mr. VashSky, what are your overall thoughts of this Tokyo Disneyland Space Mountain kind of redesign?
The cinnamon roll or the Cinnabon Space Mountain there. I like that. No, look, it's a very unique flavor. And to me, it speaks to, like you put it, OG, when you brought up the picture originally, it's kind of like this Tron kind of Space Mountain hybrid. And to me, it seems like they might be setting themselves up for maybe a Tron in the future, which is why they may have chosen this design, at least initially, and then transition into something like that, right? To me, it seems like a lot of Scott Drake influence. Scott Drake being the designer of Shanghai's Tomorrowland, and that's kind of what it says to me when I initially look at it. There's a lot of those same design elements. The sweeping walkway is probably the most prominent feature,
right?
And again, if you look at Tron out in Shanghai, that is a prominent feature of that as well. So that's kind of what it looks like to me. I wouldn't have really thought much of it, until, the big one came, which was MiceJet. Until MiceJet started talking about it and saying, we expect a redo of Tomorrowland stateside, it to be announced specifically for Disneyland at the 23 Expo. Then I was like, okay, all right. To me, it did kind of feel, I think somebody in the chat said it too. I think it was Jalen who said this was kind of like a lab rat kind of project, right? Just to kind of see how it all plays out. And I do agree. Usually when they get TDO, I'm sorry, not TDO, but the Oriental Land Company, I should say, sorry about that, to approve projects like this, a lot of times it's like, okay, let's have them, fund the development of it, fund the initial concept, and then we can go ahead and just take those development dollars and just, pour those into the domestic parks, if it actually does work out. And that's kind of what it seemed like to me, but there seems to be more, flesh on that bone, so to speak, with both now MiceJet and Walt Disney World News Today,
right?
Talking about the possibility that there might be something here for Disneyland's Tomorrowland, featured at D23 Expo. Apparently, this project's going to cost about $400 million, which that's quite a bit of cash. But apparently, Walt Disney World News Today is saying that they heard of a project for Disneyland's Tomorrowland that could have been north of $600 million. So that really kind of gets, the brain going and saying, wow, what is that money going to actually be applied for? And, in Tokyo's case, kind of understand, because they're going to rebuild their Space Mountain from the ground up. What does it mean stateside? It's a really fascinating, interesting turn of events here. And are they setting up for an announcement at D23 Expo? I mean, this is an interesting one.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Dre. Like when I saw MiceChat say they expect a Tomorrowland announcement at D23 Expo, and then Walt Disney World Today, WDWNT, also said kind of the same language. They're expecting some sort of Disneyland Tomorrowland announcement at the D23 Expo. That's pretty strong language. When you say, I don't know, and maybe this is all semantics, but when I hear expect, that's pretty strong. That's strong language. That's like saying it's pretty much like, hey, it's not confirmed, but it's pretty close. That's the way I interpret it. I'm expecting something to happen. It's pretty much going to happen. I mean, it's very close to happening is the way I see it, you know?
Well, and I think, you know, especially with Mice Chat, you know, they're very reliable on their sources and everything. Because I remember going to the last D23 Expo, and we were waiting in line to actually enter in through the expo floor, and they already had news before the doors even open, and it was all confirmed. It was all correct. But I mean, they're kind of on it when it comes to with their sources.
And I believe Dusty actually wrote that piece in
himself
in their update, which, you know, I know Dusty. He chooses his words very, very carefully. The fact that he would say "we expect" is that's quite telling coming from him. I mean, if it was anybody else, I mean, you know, maybe 50-50, whatever. But you know, this is Dusty, and he doesn't mince his words.
Right. And here's the thing too, and this is something that I've been saying for the longest time. When it comes to Disney, they always find a way. Right. And what we know about this Tokyo Disneyland Space Mountain is that, like we said earlier, it's very much a hybrid of Space Mountain and Tron.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe this is like Tokyo's way of sort of incorporating the Tron elements into their Tomorrowland without actually putting a Tron coaster proper in their land. Right. Well, that would be perfect for Disneyland because the Tron coaster is a very big attraction, right? It would take a lot of reworking to get that in Anaheim. Not impossible, but they can do it. Maybe this is the solution for Anaheim, is to sort of take Space Mountain and Tron and sort of take the best of both, you know, smush them together, and you get basically this. You kind of get the best of both worlds. Seems like that's what Tokyo is doing. And honestly, I'll be real with you. I mean, if Tokyo's doing it, it can't be that bad. Oriental Land Company has a fantastic track record. And they're already doing the R&D, the research and development on this. And I don't know the legalities necessarily of like borrowing stuff from Tokyo. I don't know if there is like I think there is kind of a grace period in which they have where they don't necessarily allow other parks to copy what they do. But maybe they'll work something out, because I think that might be a good kind of compromise. Maybe we don't get Tron, but we get sort of this Tronified Space Mountain. I don't know.
Or it may be something as an updated Tomorrowland, but it may not even be this kind of architectural style. It may be something maybe similar, but not exactly of what Tokyo is doing. Because I do know, as I said, as you had mentioned, OG, they do have a grace period, because I know that has happened with the Beauty and the Beast attraction. And that's kind of like the thorn in the haystack, so to speak, because as much as we would want Beauty and the Beast, I think if Disney wanted to do a replica of that, they would have to wait an X amount of time to do so. So I think if they're mentioning an anticipation of a brand new Tomorrowland before this one even breaks ground, so to speak, in Tokyo, it may be a different Tomorrowland, but not necessarily the one that Tokyo is doing.
Yeah, I mean, usually with those exclusivity deals that they give for these international parks, usually it's about 5 years.
Okay.
I think Walt Disney World News today was giving a timeline for this kind of Tomorrowland concept that they had initially heard. This, I guess, was before the events in 2020, so who knows what the status of this might be. But they were suggesting a timeline of anywhere between 2025 2026. We know, I think Tokyo's Tomorrowland redo might be 2027. Is that right? You know, kind of roughly. I mean, maybe it incorporates some aspects from Tokyo's, but like George said, you know, maybe it's different enough so they can incorporate it on a sooner timeline. I mean, redoing Space Mountain makes sense for Tokyo, because I mean, their track, you know, I think the opening date of Tokyo Disneyland was like what, 1984, 1986, somewhere around there. I believe Space Mountain was an opening day attraction. It kind of makes sense that they would want to redo their Space Mountain from the ground up, simply because their track is at that point in its lifespan. Whereas Anaheim had just had a whole track redo back in 2005, so it doesn't quite make sense for us. I don't know if they're gonna go that far to redo our Space Mountain, but they might. I mean, OG, you might be right. They might be incorporating Tron elements into that, and building out that facility and so forth. It's a really interesting thing, but Theme Park Casual brings up a great point, which is kind of my point, right? Which is like, listen, this has all the hallmarks of another 1998 disaster all over again. You've got the company going through, kind of these bad financial times. They're very fiscally conservative, as we would say, right? They're cutting. They're cutting back on not just the operations of the parks, but capital expenditures. We just saw Epcot's new concept, right? And that was not quite what was promised back in the day when we started tearing buildings down. So I just worry, especially seeing the Epcot concept art, I just worry about, are we headed towards this direction all over again? Is it we're gonna slash the budget to death, and what we get is what we get, and that's gonna be that way for 20 plus years, or are we actually gonna do it right? Because in my mind, if you can't do it right, it's not worth doing it all.
No, 100%. And here's the thing too, when it comes to budgetary stuff, if Disney, because everything's going on right now, like you said, it's a perfect storm with the economy. We're coming out of the pandy, all this stuff, right? Disney's looking to cut. Okay, fine. If Disney's going to do Tomorrowland on a limited budget, and this might be unpopular, but this is just how I feel, then at least put all of the money, like every dime, into giving us a unified Tomorrowland aesthetically. Don't worry about what's inside the buildings necessarily, but right now, just spend every single dime on creating a Tomorrowland that looks unified, cohesive, and impressive, right? And like what you see here with the Tokyo stuff. That same kind of aesthetics or something like that visually is appealing. And then in a few years, when the money is more available, then you can go in there and maybe replace, Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters and maybe figure out maybe what to do with Star Tours and things like that. But at least get the aesthetics right. If you're going to be on a limited budget, at least get the look of the land right. Tear down the people mover track and kind of go that direction. What do you think, George, in terms of what Casual's saying here? Do they have the budget for a proper Tomorrowland redo? He's saying he's nervous. He's been through the 98 Tomorrowland. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a major concern, because knowing Disney's track record with that, especially with Tomorrowland, it's usually not a good way of that. They have a vision in their mind, but then when it's completed, you look at it and it's like, okay, from paper to actual physical structure, it's just not there. And that is concerning. However, I'm going to try to stay optimistic and say, because that they are really pushing with Disneyland Forward, and knowing that there's going to be so many things in the pipeline for Disneyland. And as much as we're probably all tired of hearing it, but I'm going to bring it up because it's part of the conversation, especially what a lot is going on right now in Florida for Walt Disney World. I think as far as the parks go, they're going to try to aim more towards Disneyland for right now. And I personally feel like that if they're going to want Disneyland Forward to succeed within the coming years, into like 5, 10, 15 years, that the pipeline, that I think that they're going to have so much of a budget that even if they were to kind of say, hey, you know what, even if we have to pull back some things from Florida, let's put it all in for Disneyland. And as of right now, I think for Space Mountain goes, I don't really think we're going to get a whole entire Space Mountain like Tokyo is doing. But I think that the outer part of the land itself, if you actually look at the concept art, it has this very, and call me a nerd, I'm a big fan of the 2015 film Tomorrowland, and it kind of gives me that vibe when you look at that land. It's very open. You have like a lot of walking space, but yet when you look at the planters and the little sections, it matches to what the look of Space Mountain is. And I think that if Disneyland here and Anaheim kind of connects to that and hones into what Tokyo's vision is, I think that they could potentially do a good Tomorrowland that we all could say, hey, you know, this is really worth it. But Disney has to be able to say we're going to put the money in, because we also know what happened with DCA 1.0 compared to Tokyo Disney Sea.
Yes. And here's one big problem, one big hurdle for Tomorrowland. And it's not completely, it's not something that can't be avoided or overcome, but it's a challenge for sure. When Disney decided to give Star Wars its own land and give Marvel its own land in DCA, they sort of have now the two biggest franchises that could have been utilized in Tomorrowland, any new Tomorrowland. They kind of, now those two brands, those mega brands, are kind of spoken for already in two separate lands, right? In two separate lands. So now it's very limiting as to what Tomorrowland can do, assuming they're going to kind of respect the fact that there's already two lands. I'm going off of that assumption. So there's not a whole lot of IP. And again, I know fans don't like to hear this, but look, IP rules the day. Okay. If a project can get the money, it's got to have the IP. And if Marvel is already over there in DCA, then you have Star Wars already with Batu. There's not a whole lot of IP. Wally ain't going to cut it, y'all. Wally ain't going to cut it. Big Hero 6 are not big enough. Now, here's one workaround for that. And I wouldn't mind this approach. And I want to hear what you guys have to say. Chat, I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. I think you can incorporate Marvel into Tomorrowland and do it in a really clever and creative way that doesn't sort of diminish what they have over in DCA. We'll take the People Mover for an example, right? What I would do, if I ran it, what I would do is I would theme the People Mover to the Stark Industries People Mover. You have a figure in Howard Stark that was kind of very much modeled after Walt Disney. Kind of like this guy, forward thinker, all about, you know, new technology, pioneering, the forefront of all this stuff, right? So theme the People Mover to a Stark Industries People Mover, where everything is like kind of related to Stark and their kind of desire to kind of push the envelope with technology. You can even have Howard Stark in the queue talking about, hey, we developed this new People Mover technology for the world, yada, yada, yada. And the reason why I'm kind of suggesting this is because it sort of hits on both things. It sort of keeps that, like it kind of respects the initial idea and concept for the People Mover of being this kind of like forward thinking mode of transportation, but it incorporates the Marvel IP where it sort of appeases like the bean counters in the company. So you can still sell all the Iron Man and Stark Industries merchandise, but it's still kind of in line with the overall kind of message of the original attraction. I don't know. I think that might work, but what do you think, Dre? If it was themed to not an Iron Man ride necessarily, but a Stark Industries attraction, very focused on Stark and the technology aspect, could that work for Tomorrowland?
No, I absolutely do think it can work. I actually remember hearing about a Stark Industries, almost like Stark Expo idea for Tomorrowland back when I believe Iron Man 2 actually came out, which we're far removed from that. But I mean, they were thinking about that concept as early as that time period. The benefit of not maybe, theming the entire land to one IP is that it frees you. Like if you do a neutral theme, it frees you up for many IP.
Right.
So I think that might be the approach. Doing something that's designed cohesively enough in order to allow for other IP to occupy that land. I think it's where their mindset is at, and it's interesting that you would kind of say like Stark Expo. Like Stark Industries, Iron Man, People Mover kind of thing. There was an idea for a Kuka arm version of the People Mover. Actually, I think this hints at this. If you share my screen for just a second, you'll see this. You'll see this Tomorrowland concept that Scott Drake actually did before he, went out and designed Shanghai's Tomorrowland. And you can see this radical people mover concept where it looks like they're out on arms.
That's cool.
And taking up that track, and you can see the Astro Orbiter, placed where it was supposed to be, and so forth. I think there was an idea to take a radically different route with the people mover for a period of time. I don't know if those plans have changed or what, but I think anything's possible as of right now.
Yeah. What do you think, Mr. Family Man? What do you think about going that kind of like that Stark Industries kind of approach to to an attraction like the People Mover? Would you be on board for something like that? Or do you feel like that really wouldn't work for it?
I think it would work in the sense that if you were to tie the character's background, as you had mentioned with Stark Industries, into the land of what they call Tomorrowland. So as you said, you go on this tour of the Stark Industries talking about new technology, how it's going to be used, so and so. I think that would tie in really well with the Tomorrowland theme. I think if you were to take that approach on it, it would work, but I wouldn't cover the entire land with Marvel, because then that's where it's going to be a misidentity sort of thing, because you have everything titled with, not necessarily the word Marvel, but like with the Marvel IP, right. But then you're going to have the land titled Tomorrowland. I think that's where it's going to be. But I think if you take that approach of taking the People Mover and kind of saying, hey, Tony Stark created this kind of little tour going around Tomorrowland to show you, the futuristic side of everything with his company that's coming out, and, in that manner, I think that would work really well. But I also think too, aside from that, and it depends on how it does, box office wise, but they are anticipating the new Pixar film Lightyear to kind of crunch some heavy numbers, kind of getting Pixar back on track to where they used to be. And I've heard, rumors that there's possibility that the Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters could be rethemed around Buzz Lightyear, but this version of the Buzz Lightyear, not the toy, but the actual person, based on the film.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, Lightyear is probably going to be a pretty big film in theaters. It's actually, you know what? Like, I'll be real with you guys, and I'll probably get a lot of downvotes on this, but I'm not a big Toy Story guy. I'm just not. It's never one of my favorite franchises. I'm not hugely into it, but I respect the franchise because it is iconic. It's a timeless story for sure. But I gotta say, Lightyear looks pretty damn impressive. It really does. It looks really, really cool. So yeah, if they incorporate kind of that kind of thing in Tomorrowland, I'd be open for it.
That's it's interesting. That's a time when, having a Toy Story Midway Mania attraction over DCA and a Buzz Lightyear attraction over it, Tomorrowland actually worked out. So I think you could, even though Galaxy's Edge, Star Wars has a home in Galaxy's Edge, or Marvel has a home in Avengers Campus, doesn't mean that you can't separate some of these things out. A good idea is a good idea is a good idea. And, right. If that opens the opportunity for even better ideas, then, it should be probably pursued.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a great point. And we've seen it. We just did a video on this the other day, Dre, about Galaxy's Edge. A lot of stuff for Star Wars is ending up in Tomorrowland and even downtown Disney. They don't seem to be too concerned about keeping it all in Batuu, obviously. So,
and then just the announcement of the reopening of Star Wars Launch Bay over at Hollywood Studios in the animation courtyard. Yeah, that fits in really well with that.
Oh my God, I didn't even know about that. They're reopening that, George?
They're
reopening that. Yeah, which I was actually really surprised at that myself, because that entire space needs to be completely gutted.
I've heard the Imagineers talk about it and say, oh, well, Tomorrowland's where the classic Star Wars stories can, inhabit the parks, whereas the, Galaxy's Edge, that's where the current stories are, or something to that effect. It was something weird. They were attempting to justify both existing simultaneously, and it's whatever. Look, I think there's a way you can incorporate various IP, even if they have a home in their respective lands.
Yeah.
In there. Obviously, Disney's not opposed to it if they're going back to Launch Bay and a few other ideas.
Yeah,
Now,
100%.
I have a question for you, OG, because you
Sure.
had mentioned about, Wally and Big Hero 6 not really being heavy hitters, which in actuality it is true. But now if you tie them in with like a Stark People Mover and
Right.
with a Lightyear redo of the Astro Blasters, could that potentially kind of like beef it up where it's not just a standalone attraction of Big Hero 6 or Wally, but you're intertwining them with the heavy hitters such as Marvel and Lightyear?
No, 100%. 100%. If you have some other big heavy hitters in there, you got like a Marvel or Star Wars in there that's going to draw you in. And while you're there, here's a cute little Wally ride. Or while you're there, here's a cute Baymax little ride. That's great. It's like the Baymax stuff and the Wally stuff is gravy. It's all gravy, but you just need a big draw though, a big initial draw to really sell it, I think, and I just don't think that either of those franchises are big enough to sell it on its own. But as like ancillary, like secondary stuff, oh, they're great. Absolutely. They're fantastic. James Med 4 is saying here, Tomorrowland, California should be a smaller land like Adventureland, because of the obvious reason of becoming outdated. James, I gotta just... Oh, go ahead, George. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So, James, let me ask you this. So when you say smaller land, you mean reduce the land and converge more of that to the north to become more a fantasy land?
Right. That's interesting.
I'm curious.
I think he literally means make it smaller because it becomes so outdated so fast. But I gotta say, man, I think there's kind of like these evergreen concepts for the future that I think like a lot of like, if you go back to like the 1950s, like that mid-century kind of version of the future is sort of a future that we'll never have, but it looks futuristic any decade that you're in. Yeah. And I think if they kind of go in that direction, I think they'll be fine. I really, really do. I think that's futuristic enough, it's sleek enough that you're kind of okay. The Scott Drake stuff kind of touches upon that a little bit. I don't know. I don't agree with that necessarily, James. I don't think you need to minimize the footprint. I think you can do just fine. I just think they need to find the right kind of balance. What do you think, Dre? You think they should minimize Tomorrowland because it is kind of an outdated thing and it's too hard to keep up?
I mean, I think it's a decent size where it's at. I mean, if the idea is to use the kind of the land north of the Submarine Lagoon, I think there's an idea there for Fantasyland. But as far as Tomorrowland currently exists, outside of maybe the upper north end of the monorail track and maybe the Autopia and Submarine Voyage, I think the land is a decent size. I don't think it should be necessarily reduced. I think the only thing keeping back Tomorrowland right now is the aesthetics. The attractions they get hit up. I mean, Star Tours is regularly over 45 minutes. Buzz Lightyear, Astro Blasters does more than an hour. Even the Astro Orbiter does decent numbers considering what it is, and Space Mountain definitely brings them back. So I'm not sure if I would reduce the size of the land necessarily. I think the land to the north of, like I said, the kind of the Spaghetti Bowl, monorail track, I think that might possibly be eaten up, by Fantasyland at some point. But as far as the Tomorrowland currently exists, like the Tomorrowland's core, I think it's a good size. But that brings me to my next point, though. Some people are saying, well, I think Dusty, suggested that maybe you do like a Tron type attraction for a new Tomorrowland to kind of anchor, this new land around, right? But to do something like that would obviously, I mean, you need to go into that direction. It's north of the Submarine Lagoon, and I don't know if you can at this point they spent so much money rehabbing Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage. I just don't see a lot of that real estate being used. So that brings into question, like, what if you are going to do a new attraction, what size it would be. The Carousel of Progress building is large, yes, but in the modern context of modern attractions that WDI, builds, I don't know. It's kind of a small footprint nowadays.
Well, the Submarine Lagoon, I mean, the indoor portion of Tron could be maybe in the Star Wars launch bay, right? I don't know. That is pretty small. You'd have to definitely redesign the attraction. The Submarine Lagoon, though, could actually have like the coaster track for Tron kind of going over the lagoon, I guess. We've seen that like at Universal parks like Island of Adventure.
But man, you got to get your footings right, though. I mean, that's a very complicated project. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. It's just, man, that's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
Of how Disneyland is designed, Tron would be a tremendous challenge, because I think they even had a couple extra issues with it down Florida, you know, as far as like what the foundation goes and everything. But I mean, it's a whole nother deal with California. But the idea has been coming across my mind too, and our boy Matthew had mentioned it a couple passages up, that he mentioned about what the Disneyland Paris Discoveryland kind of having that mixed, where if you were to kind of, I'm probably going to get canceled for this, but to kind of take away I'll go balls to the wall with it. What the heck? That if you were to kind of take away the Tomorrowland overall theme and just kind of make it more like of a land of discovery, and I know we already have adventure, but like that kind of like that Jules Verne that I had mentioned before, like that kind of feel, where it may not be Jules Verne, but in that sense where you don't have to constantly feel like you have to keep updating because of the futuristic side of, okay, well, this is the future of tomorrow. Well, here is like the future of discovery, sort of speak.
Well, that was the idea for 1998's Tomorrowland, right? Literally the Astro Orbiter was taken straight from Disneyland Paris. I mean, they tried that and didn't quite have the budget to actually pull it off. It's yeah, we'll go ahead and do it. There you go.
That's for Matthew.
That's for Matthew right there. I mean, they tried it, and it didn't quite work out in Anaheim as was done out in Disneyland Paris. Yeah. I don't know if they would want to resurrect that concept again. I'm not sure. It doesn't quite look like that's the route they're going, especially as we're seeing the new Tomorrowlands.
I would think it would, only because back in 1998 it was a period of a time where we were still learning what that futuristic side was going to be. You know, smartphones really weren't out yet. You know, electric cars. You know, it was still like in that process, where I think we're now in a position in society where, you know, tomorrow is practically here. So like, what is the next version of tomorrow? And it's like, even like with filmmakers, you know, you had to go to school to, you know, do filmmaking, and now people just do it right at home with their camera and computer. It's like almost like a dying art form. And that's where it's like with technology given to us, it's like we're learning that craft where it's like you had to actually go out and seek it. You know, so it's like, I'm just curious. I'm wondering to know what kind of take that would be the route that I would take, more of a discover type of, you know, but I mean, again, if they have another idea in mind, Disney, if they were to have something to kind of push, I think as you both had mentioned, it's the aesthetics of like the outer part, you know, what's going to be the look of the land rather than the actual attractions themselves.
Yeah, and George, that's kind of where I was getting at too earlier. It's like the attractions aren't really the problem in Tomorrowland. Like, there's nothing really there that maybe Autopia. Sorry, Dave from Fresh Baked, but yeah, Autopia is pretty weak, brother. It's pretty weak, man. But overall, though, I mean, the attractions are pretty great. I mean, you have Space Mountain, which is arguably one of the most popular attractions in the park and maybe even the resort. You have, you know, the lagoon, the submarine lagoon, which is still a very popular attraction. You have Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, which is still very popular. You have Star Tours, very popular. The attractions really aren't the problem. It's the aesthetics. It's that you have the dead people mover track that's just rotting overhead, and you just have a lot of aesthetically unpleasing things. That's what makes it look outdated. If you were to completely redo it aesthetically and keep what the current roster of attractions, I think you could buy the land 15, 20 years maybe. It's just the look of the land, the rotting old stuff that's just sitting there empty. That's the problem. It's aesthetically an issue overall, you know?
It's a mixture of the kind of the 1960s Tomorrowland, 1980s Tomorrowland, 1998 Tomorrowland, and there have been attempts made to, make them more cohesive. But you're right. I mean, this is kind of the problem with Tomorrowland. It's just this hodgepodge, and really hasn't been done comprehensively with enough budget. And I worry about the prospect of doing another Tomorrowland redo in the modern era, simply because, man, it's just the company's going through a lot, and it all kind of lends itself to being another 1998 Tomorrowland disaster, to be quite honest with you, where we lose something else, than the People Mover. Maybe we lose Space Mountain. I don't know. It just speaks to that, though, and I wonder who at Imagineering has both that institutional memory, who recognizes these patterns and understands what has happened before, and who too is willing to take that information and willing to not go forward potentially with a Tomorrowland redo on a limited budget, and see that prospect, that golden opportunity, see it leave them in order to prevent another 1998 disaster. I don't know. I'm really not sure. I'm very hesitant about it, for sure.
Now, before he retired, was Joe Rohde supposedly working on some things in Tomorrowland?
Yep, he sure was.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was confirmed. If you guys watched the Imagineering story on Disney Plus, you can see Joe Rohde. He's got a whole model of Tomorrowland, and ironically, he was actually lifting up the Interventions building, and kind of figuring out, okay, what do we do with this in the actual footage? But yeah, no, he was 100% working on that.
Do you think he left that for possibly Disney to use? Because I know when he left Disney, didn't he move over to something with, I don't think it was NASA, but like with something.
All that work would be internal. I mean, all that work could be passed on. So
he can't take that with him. That's Disney's property. Even though Joe Rohde was working with Disney, it stays at Disney. It's like an animator. If he creates a character, or he or she creates art or whatever for a movie,
it just gets passed. Yeah,
it just stays in house. They don't have legal authority to take that with them. That's a Disney thing that they were working on.
Yeah. Yep. It's likely the version of Tomorrowland that was speculated in the Walt Disney World News Today article, which suggests a $600 million budget, 2005, 2006 timeline, that kind of thing. It was likely that, and that's kind of unfortunate that we didn't quite see that. It would have been a great going away, retirement gift, from Joe Rohde, honoring his career to have gotten that for Disneyland's Tomorrowland.
But I will say this, and Disney, yes, I'm speaking directly to you. If and when we get the Tomorrowland that is supposedly going to be announced to us, if any of those plans were part of Joe Rohde, just give him that credit, because I tell you what, if there was one badass Imagineer that worked for the company, it was Joe Rohde, hands down for me.
No, 100%. Hey, look, Joe Rohde did the impossible. Let's remember, Joe Rohde did the fucking impossible when he took the Tower of Terror and converted it into Guardians of the Galaxy. And not only did he do a good job, but he made it even better than the original.
Yeah,
dude, hats off to Mr. Rohde on that. I couldn't have done that. There's no way. The what he did with that was sheer brilliance, absolute brilliance. I have no doubt that this man would have done an incredible Tomorrowland. And George, you are 100% correct, man. If they utilize a lot of Rohde's concepts and stuff, they got to give this man credit. Give him a little homage in the land, like they do for Frank Wells in the Matterhorn and things like that. I mean, obviously Rohde is still with us, thank God. But I mean, like, you can still pay homage to the man in the land. I think you should. He's a legend. He's an absolute legend.
There's just one thing, though, that I would have changed differently with Mission Breakout, and it would have just been just a hint sweeter to know that Rohde's trademark was on it. Like on the side of the building, just have like one big gigantic earring hanging down from the building. It was part of the collector's collection.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Funny. That's
missed
funny.
Opportunity. Missed opportunity. You got to add the earring. But yeah. Oh, Matthew Murr says Rohde was even more badass than Tony Baxter or Tom Morris. Yeah, Rohde was pretty dope, dude. Rohde's a cool guy. Rohde is a really cool guy. Really creative guy. And a lot of these creatives, I got to say, a lot of the most creative people are really eccentric like that. Like you see people like Michael Jackson and stuff, right? And a lot of people would kind of dog Michael Jackson for his appearance or what have you. But a lot of these really creative types, they typically express themselves in really unique ways, you know? Yeah. And you see that even with, like, obviously to a lesser extent than Michael Jackson, but you see that with Joe Rohde with the earrings and you know, and that's cool, man. These are creatives, right? And they're going to express themselves however they want because they're creative, you know? So
it's interesting. Their eccentricisms are kind of intrinsically linked to their talent, right? You know, right. It is one of those things. And Joe Rohde is definitely a reflection of that for sure. But look, listen, you know, I mean, we'll have to see what they announce at D23 Expo. I think it's going to be a very interesting expo.
For which I will say I will be there on location for all 3 days of the D23 Expo. So I will definitely be taking a lot of notes and reporting a lot back to the fellas. So, and if you see me out there, definitely say hello. Give me a big balls to the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Not literally.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I would like to enjoy my California experience.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But Dre, you were saying, like, you know, in terms of expectations and what have you.
Yeah.
In terms of...
Yeah, I mean, we now have 2 outlets suggesting that an announcement's coming. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do end up, you know, bringing out. You know, is it along the lines of what we're seeing here, or is it something else entirely, or is it nothing? I'm really not sure. But the C23 Expo is going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I got to be real with you guys. And look, you know, I'm a half glass full kind of guy. 90% of the time, I'm looking for ways to kind of like, hey, look, there's a silver lining to everything. This is how I am. I like to kind of look on the positive side. I gotta say though, aside from very, very few occasions, the D23 Expo hasn't really garnered that much for Disneyland Resort. Typically, it's usually the Walt Disney World show 90% of the time. Look, we got the great announcement from Bob Iger about Galaxy's Edge. You know, we're not just building 1, we're building 2. Remember that whole thing? But that was only because Walt Disney World was included in that.
Yep.
For the most part, Disneyland doesn't really get a lot of stuff at these things. And that's why I've kind of tuned them out a little bit. I got to be honest with you in terms of announcements. I'm a Disneylander. I don't really, you know, I don't know, man. There's not a whole lot there for Anaheim 9 times out of 10.
I don't know. I have a feeling this expo is going to be the complete opposite from the past ones, though. I really feel like they're going to put the spotlight back on Disneyland, especially what's been going on with, you know, with the Florida situation and Walt Disney World. I think they're going to try to aim more towards a lot of the funding for Disneyland. And what better way to do it than to update their Tomorrowland?
Yeah, I hope so, man. Hope so. Dre, what do you think, sir?
I mean, we could get something where it's like, hey, you know, this concept's back on the table, like the Avengers e-ticket concept, right? You know, I mean, we could get something like that. But I always say, hey, even if it's not for your park, definitely keep an eye on what everybody else is doing, because as we started this whole thing with, when it comes to Tokyo's, you know, Tomorrowland and their Space Mountain concept, you never know when a concept like that is coming to a park near you. So always keep an eye out on what everybody else is doing. That goes for both internationally and what other, you know, theme park enterprises are doing, because you just never know. Someday that might hit your park in a very distinct way. Not unlike Tokyo's Space Mountain, just Tomorrowland concept. We'll see what happens there.
And if not, then you know what we could get at the D23 Expo is their 90th DVC resort. You know, so
yeah, there's always that.
You know, yeah, man. You know, just keep churning those out. You know, there's no short supply of those for sure. You know,
mm-hmm.
Too funny. But I want to thank you guys, and I want to thank everybody in the comments for joining us today. We were talking. This was a great conversation. You know, really fun talking Tomorrowland. This is a land that needs so much love. This is a land that, man, fans have been kind of thirsty for this for years, decades even. Come on, Disney. You know, give the fans what they want. You would make a mint if you were to do this the right way. And I don't know. We'll see.
If you do, whatever the concept is, try to stick with the concept that was given. Like, don't give us something this big, enormous, elaborate, land, and then by the time we get it, it's like 1/4 of a third to the 5th power of shit, and it's like,
wow. So what you're saying is you don't want them to shit the bed, George, is what you're saying.
exactly, yes.
Oh, how topical.
Yeah, anyone that's been following the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, it's a very topical joke in terms of shitting the bed.
That's
just saying.
That's a great way right here. Let's see if I can.
Yes, folks, we only have high-class stuff on this show.
Maybe we should end it with that and a little bit of Bill O'Reilly. What do you say there, fellas?
Let's do it.
We'll do it live. It. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
There you go.
Yes, and our friend Theme Park Casual says always got to work Amber into this. Yeah, we do. We got to add her in here somehow, man.
Hey, whether it's Aquaman 2 or DC, you always got to work in Amber.
Got to work it in. But I want to thank you, brother, for coming on. I want to thank Chad. I want to thank Jay Lynn. I want to thank Pixo. I want to thank Mulla 1289. Theme Park Casual as always, brother. I want to thank James Med, Andrew Kellogg, Matthew Murr, Pink Penguin, everybody. Peter Vasquez. I want to thank Peter Vasquez. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today, talking a little Tomorrowland. It's been a lot of fun. We will definitely, in the words of Paint the Night, when can we do this again? We will do this again very, very soon. We love the live shows. We'll do it again very, very soon. But George, I'm going to start with you to close it out. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can talk and interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. And of course, you could always find me here on Mr. Orange Grove 55's channel with Citrus Corner.
Yes, sir. Friend of the channel, family, Mr. Family Man. It's good to have you back, Mr. Family Man. You've been on a little hiatus, doing the Family Man thing,
Yes, as I said, and I'll say it again. Family Man's work is never done, but I'm very glad to be back, and especially coming back with a live show. So it's always good to talk some Disney with you fellas.
We love having you on, brother. We love having you on. Mr. Dre, producer Dre, host of Freshly Squeezed. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Well, you can interact with me on Twitter at VashSky. That's at V as in Victor, ASHSKY. Love the robust discussion there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now, Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed. Your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Yes.
Yeah, I say that does it. I think, live show, 45 minutes. I think it was pretty successful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. We love you. And until the next time, have a great day.